Daniel adjusted his camera strap as he stood before the decaying entrance of the Blackwood Hotel. The once grand building loomed over him, its Gothic architecture now weathered and covered in ivy. The town's locals had warned him against entering, speaking in hushed tones about strange disappearances and ghostly sightings. But Daniel was determined. He was a journalist, and a viral horror investigation could be his big break. As he pushed the heavy wooden doors open, they creaked loudly, announcing his arrival. The air inside was thick with dust, and the faint scent of something burnt. The grand lobby, once a lavish space, was now a forgotten ruin. A massive chandelier hung above, swaying slightly, though there was no breeze. The reception desk was still intact, a dusty guestbook sitting atop it. Out of curiosity, Daniel flipped through the pages. The last entry was dated 1926, the year of the infamous fire. But then, just below it, he noticed something even stranger. Another entry. Daniel Porter checked in. His breath caught in his throat. He hadn't written his name down. Daniel shook off the unease creeping up his spine. Surely, it was a prank, a leftover joke from a previous visitor. But the eerie silence of the hotel made him doubt that possibility. He set up his camera and began recording, narrating his experience. This is the Blackwood Hotel, a place abandoned for nearly a century. Some say the spirits of those who perished in the fire still roam these halls. As he spoke, a soft whisper slithered through the air. He froze. It had come from the hallway to his left. Slowly, he turned his head, the camera following his gaze. The corridor was empty, at least it appeared that way. But the feeling of being watched grew stronger. A door at the far end of the hallway creaked open by itself. Daniel hesitated but convinced himself it was just the wind, despite the fact that all the windows were boarded up. Taking slow, cautious steps, he approached the open door. The tarnished brass numbers on the door read 209. He stepped inside. The room was eerily untouched by time. Unlike the rest of the hotel, it wasn't covered in dust. The bed was made, the furniture polished, and a faint glow came from a lamp on the bedside table. The air was warmer here, almost suffocating. Then, he noticed something even more disturbing. A shadow moved across the reflection of the mirror on the wardrobe. But when Daniel turned around, there was no one there. A chilling voice whispered behind him, "You shouldn't be here." Daniel spun around, his heart pounding. The room was empty. He backed toward the door, his pulse hammering in his ears. And then footsteps. They echoed from the hallway, slow and deliberate. Someone or something was approaching room 209. The footsteps stopped just outside the door. The old brass doorknob began to turn. Daniel rushed to the wardrobe and hid inside, barely able to control his breathing. Through the slats of the wooden door, he could see the room. The door creaked open. A figure stepped inside. It wasn't human. The figure that entered was dressed in 1920s attire. Its skin charred and blackened, its face barely distinguishable. Smoke seemed to rise from its body, as if it were still burning. Daniel clamped a hand over his mouth to keep from screaming. The figure stood motionless for a moment, then turned its head sharply toward the wardrobe. The wardrobe door swung open violently. Daniel gasped, but instead of seeing the burnt figure, the room around him had changed. It was no longer abandoned. Instead, it was alive, fully restored, as if the fire had never happened. The hotel was bustling with guests, dressed in elegant evening wear, sipping cocktails and laughing. The chandelier above sparkled brightly. And then he understood. He wasn't in the present anymore. The hotel had pulled him into the past, into the night of the fire. The sounds of laughter and music grew louder, but Daniel could sense something was wrong. The air smelled of smoke. A waiter walked past him, but when Daniel tried to grab his arm, his hand passed right through him. He was a ghost in this timeline. A spectator of something inevitable. Flames erupted, screams filled the air, and Daniel knew what was coming. The fire had no survivors. The walls burned, the floor cracked, and the ceiling collapsed. And then darkness.